you. The sun is shining here in Amsterdam. Um, and hopefully it is too where you are. My name is Gabby. I'm the head of people of Kandidate. Welcome to our webinar, which will be more of, let's say, an energizing talk show. It's about hiring a global team when nobody seems to be hiring. So it's about global hiring, let's say the good, the bad, and the what's next. Um, who is on the show today with us? We've got a very interesting panel. We've got Andrea from Lano, Tracy from Recruitee, and my own colleague Alex from Candidate. How about the three of you introduce yourselves? And let's kick it off with you, Alex. Thank you.
We can't hear you.
Sorry, that's a good start. My name's Alex. I'm CEO at Kandidate. I started the company 7 years ago. It's my sixth company as a startup. So Kandidate, we work with about 120 scale-ups. Our team is split across 16 different countries. So a lot of the issues that we're going to be talking about today are particularly relevant for us. So I think we're a pretty good use case. Over to my colleague, Tracy.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alex. Well, my name is Tracy. I am originally from Brazil, but I've been living in the Netherlands for the last 9 years. It's been a while. And indeed, Gabi, it's like beautiful weather today, so I'm very happy. And mostly being from Brazil, the weather is good. If the sun is shining, I'm always happy. Over the last 8 years, I have been working in talent acquisition, and this year I switched to partnerships. But talent acquisition was always like my heart is where where it's always in. And even though we're in partnership, we're work at Recruitee, part of Talent, which is a company that is an ATS. So we are pretty much focused, and still, even though I'm on partnerships, I'm still very much connected with recruitment, with talent acquisition, with the culture and the company, and so on and so forth. So this is definitely a subject that I'm really passionate about. Over to you, Andrea.
Thanks, Tracy. Thanks, and hi, everyone. So I'm Andrea Carlon. I lead the business development team at Lano. I'll be sharing a bit more about what Lano does as we go through the talk. I joined the company about 3 years ago. Actually, I started my career as an attorney, so I come from the legal space, and we'll be talking a bit about compliance today. But I promise not to make it too boring for the folks on the call and everyone watching. And yeah, I've kind of pretty much in the last 3 years built the entire partner network for Lano, which is pretty much at the core of what we do. And I'm very interested in remote work myself. I'm currently working from Madrid, Spain. I'm normally based in Berlin, but I worked a couple of weeks ago from Sri Lanka. So I'm moving a lot and very excited to be here today.
Lovely. Thank you so much. As Alex already mentioned, for those of you who haven't seen his comments, let's make it interactive. Let's really engage in a conversation here. So if you've got any questions, let's say if you raise your hand, we'll address your question right away. If you drop it in the chat, I'll save your question for the Q&A at the end. Let's kick it off. So obviously there's challenges when it comes to global hiring. There's obviously advantages to it as well. So let's start with the good. Andrea, could you share your thoughts on what are the advantages in terms of hiring a global team as opposed to focusing on one or just a limited number of locations?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the most obvious one, and I guess probably my co-speakers will agree on this one, is it's the access to a global pool of talent, right? So you're not limited to by borders or just generally employers. This is kind of a tremendous win because it just widens that pool, right? Where you can access, and especially if compared with having to look in a specific market because hey, you're a smaller company, you only have one office or a couple of offices in 2 countries, and you just need to look for people in those locations. So it's pretty, and I'm really curious to hear from the experts more on the recruiting side because we're more on the compliance side. But one thing we see, and especially us ourselves as a company, is we're based in Berlin, or at least our HQ is in Berlin. We've got more than 25 people in other countries. And we know that Berlin, for example, has a high talent shortage for software developers. So for our HR department and our IT team, it's great to be able to access those other pools. I think the other kind of advantage is the ability to tap into cheaper, more competitive markets. And for me, I always try to put this in terms of the democratization power, sorry, I always like struggle with this word, but kind of the democratic power of it, because you're essentially powering or fueling locals in different locations that maybe would not have access to those sorts of jobs. So I really like this part of it, right? Like the impact for locals or for people that get access to those jobs that normally would not, thanks to kind of these global hiring talent. But yeah, curious to hear on the recruitment side, because I think there's much more there to uncover.
Thank you, Andrea. Tracy, do you agree with Andrea, or what might be any really of the challenges also here? What's your take on this?
Yeah, no, that's a very good point, and I can give an example at Recruitee, for example. So we have the business part located in Amsterdam, where it's like easier to access the challenge or the talent, but then our KA for the technology part is in Poland, for example. And not only because there is it's just because there is a hub and there is a lot of possibilities in there, and then you have much more talent access than you would have here in the Netherlands, for example. And besides that all, I think also when you hire globally and you have also better perspective in a company strategy, so you're not really focused only in one way of seeing things, and you're not only focused on one mindset, right? So when you have a diverse community, diverse employees, then and the company also has broader visibility in the market, I think, leading also to a great localization, because sometimes if you want to expand your market somewhere else, but you don't have the knowledge of the language, also the knowledge of the market, and you have the people, they are from there, so they know how things work, they know how to develop on that direction. So I think that also plays a big part. And above that all, I think it brings to the company a great sense of diversity and inclusion as well. I mean, like when you have a company that have multiple cultures, you have more possibility, you have better ways and better ways to deal with your employees. And that I think is a very positive point. I think it's very important. And of course, when you have diversity inclusion, people feel more like giving the power to the company, and then seeing different perspectives than what you would normally be seeing if you have a company that's only like focused like a Dutch company only. I have worked in companies only Dutch. The way of thinking, the way of doing things is very different from when you have a company that is like more global and have like more broader way of seeing things. So that part, I think those points are very important.
Definitely. I could see where that would be going if it would only be Dutchies in a company. It can not only be super positive. Alex, could you share a few of the challenges that people
okay, so I had all the positives all set up. Well, I'll just start with a sort of, I guess we'll call it like the cultural diversity, which for me is a huge positive. We have team members all across the world, and it's really exciting, especially if you do like an offsite. That's just incredible to see so many different cultures merge. I think with that, you also have to understand that all cultures communicate in different ways. The Dutch being a good example, and we joke about this a lot, but I think even just across Europe, you really have to understand that there are going to be situations where there will be misunderstandings. So I think on the communication, you really have to think about that. I mean, that's something you could argue is, if you have a kind of remote team, the comms have to be fantastic. But I would focus on the communication. That is a challenge. Now, just the setup of this, and that's, so Lano and also Recruitee, you can speak much better than I could on the tools that you need to do it. But there's the last thing I would say is, from a board perspective and CEO perspective, sometimes if they haven't experienced like hiring in 16 different countries, they start to see it as this huge worry. Oh, how are we going to do payroll? How's this going to work? What happens if we have an HR problem? And in fact, we've really had very few challenges. You just need to think it through. You just need to speak to other teams and founders who are actually doing it. But most of the problems are pretty easy to solve.
Thank you, Alex. And thank you, Paul, for dropping that question in the chat. We'll save that for the Q&A at the end of the session. Andrea, Alex already mentioned that obviously there's technology, there's tools that might come in super handy in particular on this point. Could you share some of your ideas, maybe some best practices you've seen? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, on the point he was making around setup, I think that's really boils down to compliance. Like you normally have an HR manager or a person in charge of talent acquisition that doesn't necessarily have like the legal knowledge of what it is like to hire in another country. And you can't expect that from them, right? Like you don't even get it from a lawyer. So fair enough. I think that solutions like employer of record is huge in terms of like what it can allow you to do. Platforms like Lano, where you can kind of like consolidate all your payroll and visualize it all. It's helpful because it essentially helps you navigate that compliance, which is the biggest, I would say, the top one challenge, or just essentially knowing what the setup is, but also avoiding risk, right? So you don't want to end up in court or being fined because you violated labor laws, but also you didn't do things right. And this is something that when you're a smaller company, you're more ready to take risks, but as you grow, you also have to think that those sorts of things are going to come back after you later on. So this is something that I talk a lot with founders, and I think that what Alex mentioned, it's great advice to get from other founders to see how did they do that, and there's solutions out there. I think the kind of best practices is one, to look at compliance as a whole, not only as kind of from a risk perspective, but just as like what is the best setup for us. Do we want to use employer of record? Do we want to set up an entity? Do we want to go through something called foreign employer, which is like non-residential payroll, which is also a solution in some locations in Europe? And then the other aspect that I'd say is like looking at cost, right? So your budget, where does your budget fit? Like you might not be able to hire a developer in France or in the US, but you might be able to afford them in Brazil. But that being said, you also have to take into account that it's not only salary, you have to pay things like social costs, right? And Brazil has really high social costs. So just to give you an idea, it's around 86%. So that's something that initially people don't know, and then they come and it's kind of a surprise. So I'd probably say that from my angle, it's look at compliance and cost and factor those in when you're making that initial consideration of like having a global team. And totally agree on the diversity aspect. I was actually going to mention it, that it's just huge. It's tremendous, the impact. I've also worked in Spanish-based companies with only Spanish people, and then I moved to New York and I worked with people from everywhere. And now at Lano, we're just multi nationality, and it's just much better. I love it.
Yeah.
So one small challenge that I've just realised is that we always have one day in the week where it's got one team member on holiday. So
plus time zones. Time zones are always a challenge as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Spain tomorrow is a holiday. Is that right?
Yeah, and then you have the local ones, which is
Right,
the complexity, right? Like we have a lot of people in Germany, and in Germany, Berlin and the South might not have the same, and same for Spain. I have a team member in Madrid and someone else in Barcelona, so they don't share holidays. So yeah, it's definitely a challenge. But hey, 4 days a week, right? So we're kind of going in that direction.
Yeah, I think those things plays a big role as well. Like we have a team in New York, for example. So for us, it's always like, for example, customer support and customer success. We have the team in New York, and then we have the team in Europe. And that sometimes is quite a challenge also, like on a working time, and also to think, okay, on a strategic point of view, how are we going to do things? How are we going to develop these things together? So it's always very important to think on that part as well. Like we tend to think, oh, like there's only the positive things, but of course there are a few other challenges that has always to be taken in consideration as well. But I think when you have a great plan, you have a good strategy, and then you know what you're doing, like you spend it in that direction, you have to get a really good game plan, everything really well arranged in order to be able to open to this access as well. So I think before you decide, okay, I am open, I'm ready to go for it, you always have to have a really good plan really good thought about it, and then like seeing all the legal sides as well, like Andrea was mentioning, this is a very important part, which I, for example, don't have that much knowledge in it. But yeah, that's one of the reasons why we, like, nowadays in our company, we have a few entities in a few specific places, because we know that there we can actually explore the market and go further. But those are things that are always really important to be taken in consideration before you open to a global direction.
Cool. That sounds very interesting. And so you just, let's say, touched on the main angles, right? To let's say, the main considerations. If we have to make it a bit more, let's say, specific for the people that are attending here and that are either, well, in a stage where they're already globally hiring, or they would like to start with it, what are, let's say, 2 or 3 steps you can literally take in the next 30, 60 days to make it a bit more specific for the audience? Andrea.
Okay, something specific. So I'd probably say check if you have some sort of remote culture going on, because I think if you come from, so like, let's assume you're like an early stage startup and you have 5 employees, and then you're going to do that jump and you're like going to test a market, and you want to hire like I don't know, a country manager in Spain, and you want to, have a bunch of salespeople in Germany because you want to test out that market as well in the DACH region. You need to ensure that you have some sort of remote culture, right? Like, you cannot go, or at least hybrid, if you do have this kind of office situation and then people that are going to be in different locations, you need to make sure that these people are not going to be isolated. So kind of check in, even if you're a small company, just make sure that everyone can feel included. So whether it's like regular check-ins on Slack or stand-ups, there's a lot of tools out there to kind of foster and engage remote employees. And I think that's like, I would probably say, going from a totally remote, from zero to totally remote, or from some sort of company in a location, look at the remote culture situation. That would be like my number one, I would say, to start off. And then number two, use what I mentioned before, like use tools where you can outsource compliance, and essentially not need that knowledge. So yeah.
Thank you, Andrea. And Tracy, what is your take on this? So let's say about any more specific steps people can take.
Well, having a good ATS. Now, besides on the fact that we are an ATS tool ourselves, but beside on that side, it's really important. Beside, like, I have worked in companies again that did not have any tool that actually facilitates them to hire globally. And then basically you're just playing with spreadsheets, and you're just playing around with emails as well, and then it gets really messy, right? So if you have the right tooling, and if you have the right possibilities in the ways, like the enablements to make that happen, that really change a lot. Like, so for example, then you have pipelines that you can also share a job in different locations, because sometimes there is a specific things that you have to find in that specific location, but you need to have the same person, for example, in Germany or in the US. So you can divide and then the pipelines in a different way. And I truly believe in ATS makes a big role here, plays a big role, because without it, it can get very messy. It can get very, for all the teams as well, it's very hard to understand what is a priority, who we're going to hire, where we're going to hire, how we're going to do this. And then you just have a bunch of spreadsheets and a bunch of things that doesn't really facilitate that. And on the side of all, I think also you need to have all the tools aligned of how you're going to be doing this communication. So again, like the strategy plan before you're going to be bringing that up, it's very important. So on that side, means that you also have to have a good and visionary HR team, I would say. So a very stable team that actually knows what they're doing, and they are really open to face all the challenges that are going to be there. And like Andrea said, for me, the most important part of all, it's also to be sure that you are open for the diversity and all the different points that's going to be coming to your company, right? You really need to consider that is like all different points of view, all different people will be involved in that. And then the culture here plays a really big role. So that's why I think an HR team that is very well structured with the right well, not only in ATS, but also has a good payrolling tool, that will facilitate that to happen, and then have all the strategy points in place. I think this is tremendously important for a company to be open globally.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. But also, I think you also need to have leaders. They are really open and understanding that is like they are there for this. You know, they will support everyone that is coming in their company in the right way. So also listen to your employees. You know, have a good surveys and then have like good ways of facilitating those things to happen and be inclusive in every sense that you can do.
Yeah. And Tracy, at Recruitee, what is one of the things you are doing to, let's say, hear all voices? So to really, apart from being diverse, also being really inclusive, let's say.
Oh, that's a great question. Actually, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was participating in a webinar where we really extensively talked about that. So basically, what we do is like staying in surveys as well. So where you want to hear what are people actually thinking and also where they are located globally. Like people tend to have like the welcome survey, like, okay, after a month, we're going to do a survey, we're going to understand how you feel. And after you're going to be leaving, then we're going to be checking like, hey, what's going on and why you're leaving us. But if you have these staying surveys, you can actually find out how are the people feeling while they're working, what do they need, and also again have this strong leadership team that will support everything that HR will find out to actually transparent that to the company. And I think above it all, it's also very important to have a bottom up kind of setup, right? Because when you have actually, when you listen to your employees, when you listen the needs, then you can actually bring transformations. As in Recruitee, like a month ago, we also had, for example, neurodiversity webinar. So to explain how is it to work with people that are in this spectrum, you know, how is that, what we can do, how we can facilitate. We also had examples for Hamadan, how does it important Hamadan for the culture that actually participates in it, how do they live with it, what are the important points, and how we can help them to empower that in themselves as well and inside of the company. So I think above it all, you need to listen what the people are saying. Like, you know, you need to also not only listen, but take real actions about on the side of it. Because if you don't, then you're just a company where you're just like running farther, like looking for the best,
Yeah.
for revenue and whatever, but you're not really like seeing that inside of your company. I think your employees are just the heart of your company. If you don't have them like beating on the same direction you are, then things are just going in the wrong side.
Absolutely. And neurodiversity, it's such an interesting topic. We lately had Theo Smith. Not sure if you're familiar with his name. We had him as one of the speakers at a VC event that we organized, and he's an expert. Let's say, well, he's neurodiverse himself, and he would always talk and explain how important it is that also your workforce is neurodiverse, and that those people actually bring certain skills that other people actually might not be able to bring. It's different skill sets really that they
Yeah.
so super interesting.
And it's great, like when you know also how to work with the differences as well, it can only bring positivity to your company, right? So also like to be able to
Exactly.
hear, but again, like that's why I always come back, like when I have a strong HR that is able to take directions and a strong leadership team that actually can take that back to their teams, then these all together really makes a big difference on when you talk about diversity inside of a company. That's how we do at Recruitee, and then it's something I'm very proud of being part of a company like this. It's also bringing awareness for the GLBT. It's a big site. I don't know how to say GLGBT community as well. So now is the Pride Month, right? So we are doing a lot of initiatives as well to let everybody understand and know. So last year we had a very beautiful video with a colleague that he was he's transverse himself, and then we taped, and then we went to his house to show how he feels, how he lives, then like to truly understand the other side and the people that are somehow bringing different points of view to a company, which is just can only enhance the company in all the directions.
Awesome. That sounds pretty cool. Let's
Quick,
talk.
Abby.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sure.
Real
Alex,
quick. I
go
was going
ahead.
to say,
Go ahead.
so we see two drivers, and I think the sort of two key drivers, basically cost and sort of talent shortages. That's the conversations that we have with founders, where it leads it to we need to expand the team. So I live in Lisbon, in Portugal, and just spoke to a San Francisco-based founder, and it was quite a funny comment. He said to me, he was like, "I've just realized that I could hire a team of 8 engineers for the cost of 1 engineer in San Francisco," and I think the interesting thing about that is he's looking at purely from a cost perspective. And you made a really interesting point, Andrea, is I think for us, we see it as actually, because you're hiring everywhere, you can find the best person with the best skills for that role. And it doesn't matter where they're from. And I think what we're seeing is some forward-thinking companies, one in particular called, it's called The Mothership. They don't allow you to put like a CV into their hiring process. Why? Because they ask you questions, and they're specifically asking you questions about skills, how would you tackle things, role plays and stuff like that. So maybe I've skipped a bit here, Gabby, so sorry, but I think it's leading to this sort of change. And I think, you know, the tools that we're talking about today, that these are driving this changes because it's just facilitating all of this. But there's a few different things going on. It's not just cost. That is a factor. And you can possibly pass that on to your customers, or you can hire a bigger team. But there are so many opportunities of finding the one person in the world or the 10 people in the world who are the best at whatever skill it is you need.
Sorry, Tracy, go
I was
ahead.
going to say, when you have also good hiring strategy, and you also need to make sure that those strategies make sense for your company, that is really beautiful. There are also a lot of tools, for example, gamification. So they're going to hire a programmer, for example, instead of like asking them questions in a traditional way of interview, then you give them this kind of games. So they need to go through the game. So then you actually can access all the skills that you won't be finding if you just have an interview with one-on-one of talking with a person. Of course, the one-on-one is tremendously important, because then you get to know a lot of like the specific skills that you're looking for. But when you open to gamification, for example, or if you open to like not knowing who is on the other side, then you actually start seeing way different things that you actually principal looking for. And then after you start seeing, okay, these things are also very important and very like, yeah, they are the best ones in the hiring process because of this and that. And then they brought a different perspective to the hiring process as well.
One thing I'd like to kind of add to that. So I do agree that kind of addition to the hiring process and not doing it as standard or perhaps as static as we've done it in the past is great. One challenge I would kind of add to that is that when you're hiring globally, you also have the cultural nuances, right? So you might find a great developer, they have the skill set, they can pass the game, they can do a great job, but maybe their English is not great. And then just to give one example, right? Or they're not a culture fit. So you also have to bake into the recruitment process this kind of culture fit. How do you do that? That's one of the biggest challenges we see, right? One of my favorite books is The Culture Map of Erin Meyer. I think it's a book that I recommend to everyone that works in companies with different nationalities. And I think this lady should actually update this book to make it for remote work, because then on top of that, in remote work, you're not in an office, right? So you're not talking to your Indian colleague, and maybe I'm from Spain and my English is not native. So we might struggle. We're struggling on Slack. We're struggling on a video call. So that's something that I feel like companies should also take into account when they're doing global hiring, right? So your example, Alex, of I can hire for 8 developers, where make sure that those cultural nuances are also baked into your hiring process, and you're looking into that.
Yeah, so we found closing is actually harder. So obviously, normally you would close, I mean, I guess you can still call them, but if I was hiring for the office in London, I would meet and I would make sure that I could do it. Obviously, we can't do that remotely, but we've definitely seen there's a difference with the closing rates for like fully remote teams versus teams who actually meet for the close. So there's various different tactics that we try and help our clients with to like try and improve that. So just recording a video, even just a 60-second video, has a massive impact.
Thank you, Alex. Sorry, was there someone? No. Alex, since you've been, let's say, scaling Kandidate and you're super well connected in the VC network, what would you say are some of the other really big challenges for companies that are about to scale their company, their teams?
From a VC lens, I think there are some VCs that they feel uncomfortable when you don't have the team in the same building. And that can really vary. The attitudes vary. We're seeing it every day in the media. So Meta just announced today that they've gone back to 3 days in the week. So we're really at this strange stage where obviously COVID forced remote, and then we all had lots of advantages from that. And now you're seeing the swing back to hybrid. And obviously that is changing. Some of the hiring may go back to local. Having said that, there is still a section of scale-ups and lots of companies who are really sort of embracing fully remote and global hiring. I think also we're seeing a lot of international expansion. So in various different guises. One thing I would caution for any company considering this is when you have your HQ and you have an office there, and then you have a remote team who are working from home or even from co-working spaces, that can be a strange situation because there's a sort of HQ culture and there's a culture outside, and it's quite challenging to merge those. So that's something to really think about.
Thank you, Alex. On the bit that you mentioned where, let's say, companies are demanding from their team to be at the office for a specific number of days, there's obviously a, let's say, trust, let's say, aspect to this, right? What's your take on that, or what are any of the things you back then considered when actually setting up a remote company?
I mean, so personally, I just think you have to trust the team. And I think the great thing about startups and scale-ups is that you're all kind of on the same mission. It's a very intense atmosphere. The tools that we all use, you know, you can see if someone's on Slack or not. And I think you have to be really careful. You have to think carefully about what you want that person to achieve, and you have to communicate that and really spend time so it's really clear for them. A lot of companies are moving to sort of asynchronous working and things like that. So trust for me, I think if you're clear enough with that team member, you know, 99% of people want to do a really great job. Yes, if you're a 5,000 person company, that's a bit more challenging and you have to think that through. But for me, trust is inherent.
I think that's an interesting point you mentioned, which to me makes total sense. However, I think we are now in a world where being busy, where activity sometimes seems to be, let's say, incentivized. And I think, as you, Alex, mentioned, if you set clear metrics and are being clear with your team on what to achieve, and be able to, let's say, track progress, have a conversation when things are not working out, that, to me also seems to be key. So I think that's essential.
If I can add something,
yeah, sure.
I typically think, and of course this is not true across the board, that it's easier to hide in a big organization. So like the tech companies, right? Like a lot of these tech companies that have done massive layoffs, like there were a lot of people living quite well and hiding because it's just the nature. Like it's when it's a bigger organization with tons of funding and the market, and you're just like a Google, like it's going to be easier. I think in startups, typically you can't hide so easily. And I do think that like tools like Alex mentioned, like Slack, right? Like you're just promoted to be visible. You want to make your job visible. You want to do that impact. Usually people that join startups, they're also motivated by, you know, the salaries are going to be definitely lower than corporate, but you're going to have that kind of thrill of, okay, I'm building something. I joined a company when we were 15. We're now about 130. Seeing that kind of growth has been really exciting for me, like just being able to build structures, build things from scratch. And I think that that's kind of the mindset that you have. You're going to always have people that are just going to try to hide. That's just nature of life. But I think in these sorts of structures, it's harder because you don't have 6 people for one role. You have maybe like one person, and then as you grow, you get more funding, you can maybe hire more, and then maybe a crisis comes along, and then you gotta hire a bunch of people and do a cleanup. So that's kind of the cycle. Sorry, it sounds horrible, but
this is the cycle of work life.
But it is true.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
it's what we're seeing right now. So
yeah, absolutely. Tracy, any, let's say, best practices from your team, actually, Recruitee, or any of the partners that you work with on this particular point?
Yeah, I was going to say also, like, for example, that again, back to the surveys, when you understand also how does your team works best, you know, like there is a lot of people that they feel like I want to go to the office every day. So you want to understand, like, okay, what is the percentage of people that actually want to go to the office every day? And I know people that want to go to the office every day. So this is very important to listen and to understand. So it also, from the surveys, we noticed that most of the people, they are willing to go hybrid, like they didn't want to go to the office. They didn't want to have that obligation. Okay, you have to go to the office. You have to be here because we wanted to create this company culture in the office. That's how you environment with the teams as well. In our case, so we did the survey. We found out that the hybrid environment was the best for everyone. So what we did, it also became at the end part of our values. So the freedom to thrive. You decide how you want to work. If you are just like, if you're working for us, we trust that you are doing your job in the right way. You're going to deliver what you have to deliver in the right moment, and then you can like bring positive points to the company. Because I have friends that they were like obliged to go back to the office every day, and they're just living a miserable life because that doesn't comply anymore with how they live and how they experiment while COVID, where everybody had the possibility to work from home. I worked in a company while COVID that I had to work in office every day while COVID was happening. So for me, it was like, I know for sure that I don't want to be working in the kind of environment where it obligates me to do certain things that doesn't align anymore with how I see things. So that's why I like to be working in a company where this is part of their culture. This is part of like the base of the company is like, you have the freedom to be who you are, how you want to grow, and how you want to bring that to the company. If you want to come every day to the office, welcome to come every day. If you want to fully work remote, you fully work remote. But if you come once in a while, it's very well seen and appreciated, because then you can build this community with your colleagues, right? But I think
Mm.
you just need to make sure that you listen what your employees are saying and what works the best for your company as well. And yeah, I think that is how it works the best, like Andrea and Alexa already said as well.
Mm. Thank you, Tracy. Andrea, you already just touched upon, let's say, the cycle of work life, and companies going to to a crisis, and then there might be another crisis in a few years. We've had COVID, obviously, which might have been, let's say, a catalyst for change, or some of these things were already quite happening, let's say. We're now in quite an interesting phase, let's call it interesting phase as well. What would you say is for you the main thing that you are now keeping an eye on, which might be quite a hard question, and how to, let's say, prepare for what is coming for the next phase, let's say.
Yeah. On the COVID topic, our CEO always likes to say that COVID kind of threw us into 2030, just boom, like directly. And remote work was something that kind of was bubbling, and then the pandemic just like launched us into it, right? So I think a lot of people were just remote by force, and then as kind of we've settled out of the pandemic, now finally out, we see all these models, right? Tracy was mentioning hybrid. We've got like fully remote. We've got, within a country you can have different setups. So there's just a lot of setups. I mean, I just came back from a conference in Lisbon about remote work, and I was shocked. Like they were like mentioning like literally 10 different setups that I had never heard of. Like that's the future, right? Like that's where we're going to. But my point is, what we're in our space, I think the things that are kind of concerning, or things that we're looking through, or kind of being a bit vigilant about, is obviously economic uncertainty. So we're in a time of a lot of layoffs, companies restructuring. I think this economic uncertainty will also accelerate more the search for global hiring. So I do think that there will be more companies looking into cheaper markets, other solutions, being a bit more flexible. So it's not only negative there. I think there will be a kind of a positive aspect. And for us, the other point, or the other big topic, is regulation, right? Because this is going to be a big factor in terms of some countries deciding to hinder their options of capturing foreign workers. So if we think about the employer record model that I mentioned earlier, this is a model that is highly reliant on governments tolerating it. In some countries, it's kind of operates a bit in a gray area. It's not illegal, but it's not fully legal either. Like it means that it's kind of operating in this gray area where governments know about its existence and social security agencies, and they're like, okay, fine. But at some point they could decide, okay, we're going to stop working with these models, and we're going to try to get these companies to actually bring us revenue through income tax, or sorry, corporate tax. The other aspect is like digital nomadism, right? So countries like Portugal, they've done huge efforts now to bring a lot of digital nomads, especially Spain as well. So all of these kind of government policies, regulations, laws will, I think, really kind of um, uh, basically make some countries very competitive versus others will not, and they will kind of drag behind. And so I'm very curious to see what's going to happen there. And it could affect a lot of companies in this kind of HR tech space,
Mm,
like Lano. Yeah.
absolutely. And Tracy, what are one or two, let's say, global hiring market trends, or anyway trends apart from economic uncertainty, indeed, that will drive a lot of change, let's say, in the next year, according to you?
Yeah, I one thing is important, like what Andrea was saying, like COVID, even though it was a terrible moment for everyone, was a terrible time for everybody. It really brought so many positive points of view when you're talking about employees, right? So it gives a lot of rights to a lot of people and then to a lot of companies to see things in a different way. So I know I see for sure like this is definitely something that really empowered a lot of companies to grow and then to change their strategies in a different sides and in different ways. So I see that also at Recruitee, for example, we were scaling up while COVID was happening because everybody was then could work from home. We could hire in different locations. Like Andrea was saying, like you have like Portugal now with hubs for digital nomads. There's also in Bali also a huge community, and then people were just more free to go around. So they really like pushed the market with something that was bubbling for years. Everybody was talking about. So also like with other tools that was coming up, like all these Zoom, Google Meets, and all these kind of things. Before everybody was just like, there are some tools, there are some things, but that you don't really use in the power that they had. And nowadays, like we have all those tools that are really empowering, Slack and Teams and everyone and all the other tools. So those things are very like the technology plays a big a role here as well. Um, I also think it's important when you are like living in a crisis and living in a moment that is like hard, like we're living now, right? So I have many companies all in the globe are not hiring. It's just to take care of employment branding as well, to make sure that everything that you have, everything that you transfer from the outside, that you make sure that you organize inside as well. So also like, for example, having a good tool for hiring that you are like, you know for sure how you're going to bring the strategies, create a great career page, through our ATS, for example, you can have a career page that you can bring it inside. So you really need to plan well your employment branding. You need to plan well what you want to talk and what you want to show to everybody outside, not only for your future customers, but also for your employees that are going to come to work for you in the future. Sorry, it's very important that you really like arrange the house in a very good way, also in all the compliances and where you're going to expand your markets and so on. So after that, then when you are like the market is like going down again and everybody can see all the movements that we had like with hiring everywhere, that you have everything already like well planned, right? So we always say like when you have the crisis, instead of like thinking, oh, we drop everything and then we leave everything behind, we really should reconsider, okay, what are the structures that we have now in our company? How can we make this to leverage for in the future? Like what we can do, what we're doing now that we can actually make it better for in the future. Use good tools that are actually really going to empower your company to grow. I think those points are very important as well to touch upon. And yeah, just
Very interesting. Thank you, Tracy. Alex, what are your, let's say, final words on this? And then let's have a Q&A. But yeah, first of all, Alex,
Yeah, so
what are
two
your final
factors.
words
I
on this?
think economic uncertainty, the way we see it, things are going to be pretty up and down for the rest of the year. I really hope I'm wrong, but that's from everything that we're seeing. But then I think that we're seeing a lot of companies who are delaying their hiring. So I think it's just, there is going to be huge demand. So I think we will have a quarter where it will really increase. It won't be like what happened in 2021. That was mostly in the sector that we're in. That was 3x the amount of kind of VC money that we've ever seen in the world that came in very fast. That's why it felt so crazy. We have to mention AI. We could do a whole another 60 minutes on this. So what I'll try and do is just have a kind of answer Paul's question here. He said, what is your stand on candidates using artificial intelligence? I mean, like what you meant was, so actually in the kind of recruitment process. We've had about 10 stories of these engineers who are being caught using AI in the kind of tech test. So that's happening more and more, which is why there's new technologies that are being built where they can't use AI, but they can always use a separate laptop. So they're having to do things like film the laptops and things like that with their phone. So it's a really challenging time when you're trying to test people and they can go to a ChatGPT or something similar and it could just do it for them. So content writers too. How do you test a content writer? So there's various different tests in the hiring process that we're having to rethink really quickly. So my take on it is obviously you shouldn't be using it, but I sort of commend, I think, some candidates who are being really creative, because that's kind of what I look for in a candidate, is someone who's prepared to think around a problem. So probably don't take that as my advice, but we're definitely seeing a lot of people using AI in the kind of recruitment process. And then there was, maybe I'm not the best person to answer this, Gabby. A question for Paul. Well, so cultural diversity. I mean, you're the head of people, Gabby. I mean, you deal with all the company. How would you answer that? Sorry, throwing it on you there.
No, that's completely fine. What I wanted to mention, by the way, Alex, on the AI question, I think what could be an interesting one here is that you do allow people, maybe you ask people even to use AI, and then you ask that specific candidate to critically assess ChatGPT answer, which then enables you to evaluate critical thinking really as a skill. So you have the best of both. Tracy?
Yeah, I just want to say that it's like we can't avoid that it's part of our work nowadays, right? So I also think that is a little bit strict if you say like you don't want the candidates to use. I think it's very empowering for them to be using that. Also, a lot of people used to prepare for an interview, for example, to understand better how can I answer a few questions that this company might be asking me, and then to see their critical mindset, like you're saying, like to understand how they're gonna use these answers to actually empower their application. I think it's great, and I think we can and not expect that the candidates are not going to be using if we are using ourselves, right? So as a recruiters, for example, we are not copywriters or anything, so we have like helps also of the tools to help us to write down the job description, for example, like in partnerships that we also use for content and so on. But then it's like you get a base from there and then you can actually develop further, right? So then you can point specific points of view, you can personalize things. And I mean, this is something that is only going to grow and grow and grow and grow. This is like a high topic, and then everything is talking about this year. But this is like the beginning of all that in 3 years time, when we look back, we'll be thinking like, oh wow, this was like just so the beginning, like there's so much more to come. And I think we just need to be able to embrace it and then to work towards and then together with it.
Exactly.
We can't avoid it anymore. So I just think we start seeing like what you said, like maybe ask them, use it, and develop further. This is a great example. We'd like it. Yeah.
I'd
Andrea?
like to ask like my fellow panelists what they think if it should be dependent on role, so or not, right? Because this is a kind of a tricky one. This kind of cross-culture communication trainings, do you need to give them to the entire company, or I don't know, like if your IT team is not really, I mean, I don't know. I'll give an example. In my company, we had an IT team that was pretty much based in Ukraine primarily. We also had some folks in Poland, and they were really detached from the company. So we hired someone who, kind of brought them a bit closer and helped with that kind of cross-cultural communication aspect to really also bring them to become more interested on the business side. And I'm wondering if it's dependent on role or not, if it should be something that we should just, I'd be in favor of doing it across the company, but I also understand that comes at a cost, right? So
Yeah, so we see this even with kind of engineering teams that are in the same building. They tend to have their own distinct culture, which is slightly different from the wider company culture. You also see it in kind of sales team, that intensity and things. So I think it's bound to happen. It's bound to happen over a certain size. I would say after 50 plus, you start to see slightly sort of microculture start to build. I think if you have the budget, I think it's really important to sort of do this training, try and foster it. I think also just being really open about the misunderstandings that happen. British humor is not for everyone, and there are probably lots of other examples. US culture, very distinctive. Working out in the US, I was there for 9 years, had 3 startups out there, really, really quite different sort of atmosphere. So I think just talking about these things, trying to make it like, you can have some really fun sessions where everyone talks about the quirks of each country, or shows the TV in each country, or this was the favorite show, this is the favorite pop star at the moment. And like those sort of things can actually bring everyone together.
Love that.
Good one, Alex.
Love that
Yeah,
reference of the pop star. I
yeah.
think I'll
And I
suggest
think,
that.
and also, Alex, as you mentioned, just indeed, just talking about, I remember that when I just started at Candidates, I mean, were basically the one who trained me, right? And I remember that, yeah, from time to time, I would write an email, which was a little too direct. And you said, Gabby, the point you're getting across is absolutely correct. Just soften the language a little. And I thought, well, yeah, I blame it on my Dutch roots. um, Thank you so much. Let me check if there are any other questions in the chat. No. Who else has a question that could be interesting to discuss for the last, let's say, 3 minutes? And otherwise, we are going to wrap it up. Thank you so much, Tracy, Andrea, and Alex, for sharing your insights, your own experience with global hiring, and any of the challenges you came across. I'm sure everyone is now going home to the dining table with new insights. This is not the end yet. For all of the people who are joining here, we've got a nice little extra for you. We've gotten all three of us actually got an offer for you. Andrea, what is the offer for the audience here from Lano?
Actually, I'm not sure what the offer is, but because I wasn't told, but I'm happy to make an offer here. My offer would actually just to be reach out to me. I'm super happy to connect you with my team if you're interested in employer of record and other solutions. We also have payroll consolidation, and we offer advice just generally for companies who want to know where to start from. And I'm always happy to connect for partnerships as well. I know we have a great partnership going on with you guys, and with Recruitee, I believe we've also spoken. Would love to become partners as well. So yeah, that's my offer. But if you want anything more specific, I think we're pretty competitive on the employer of record front. So we can make your dreams of hiring a Spanish software developer become true.
I've put you quite on the spot, Andrea. Now people are gonna send their wish list to you. You can blame it on me.
Oh,
Um,
good.
so not sure if that is the same actually for you, Tracy. But Alex, maybe we can talk about our offer anyway, right?
So I'm actually not sure either, but
I'm sure.
first
I'm sure.
suggest is that we'll do a follow up on an email and we'll list
Yeah.
all three offers. I think. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm letting off, but
Yeah, the form is now in the chat. We will also send it around. So that is for anyone of you who would like to benefit from all the offers here. The offer from Candidate, it is a super interesting one. We offer you to actually source 20 candidates for either a role that is super urgent for you or really challenging. The sourcing will be done by one of our amazing senior sources. I think there are a few on the call here. And these are the people that are excellent at X-raying social and tech platforms. So there are no fees, even if you would hire someone from the list, which is obviously the idea. There are no catches. We will just provide a high quality list to you. That's our offer. What
Yeah.
else? Alex, sorry. Yeah, go
No,
ahead.
I just wanted to say in our side, what we are offering is a free trial environment, and also a tailored walk through our system. Sorry, with one of our specialists. We have great people. I was actually just asking Alexander, he's here in our meeting, his name is also Alexander, what is actually that we are offering, because I knew it was something related to maybe a demo account or something. So he was just answering to me right now via Slack. And yeah, so he was just explaining me that this is what we're going to be offering. And also on the side of it, I am also pretty open to help and to guide everyone or anyone that wants to know and understands more about the HR environment in the Netherlands. Feel free to also add me on LinkedIn, and also to follow our accounts on LinkedIn as well, Recruited by Talent. And then we were always like sharing different points of view, different things, and about recruitment and HR worlds. Yeah, so feel free to reach out to me and also one to our colleagues. And if you want to have the walkthrough and then to know more about our product, we are more than happy to help.
Thank you, Tracy. That sounds awesome. It seems that the three of us are definitely going to make your lives a bit easier in the next phase. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. It was fantastic seeing you all here. And again, we will do a brief follow-up just via email. Any more thoughts, anything? And otherwise, wishing everyone a sunny afternoon.
Super,
Thank
thank
you
you.
very much.
Yeah.
Thanks for having
Ciao.
us.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye bye.